I was still in my Navy uniform when I learned that my father had abandoned my grandmother in the hospital. The nurse's voice over the phone trembled. "Your father left 2 days ago. He said he couldn't handle it anymore." That sentence hit harder than any storm I'd faced at sea. I was a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy stationed out of Norfolk, Virginia. I'd just returned from a 7-month deployment aboard the USS Abigail Adams. My body was still rocking with the rhythm of the waves when I threw my sea bag into the back of my Jeep and drove straight to Ohio. The drive felt endless. 7 states, 4 rest stops, and one question repeating in my mind. How could he do this? When I reached the hospital, it was late evening. The fluorescent lights painted everything pale and lifeless. My grandmother Margaret Carter was in a recovery room, a maze of machines, IVs, and gentle beeping sounds. Her face was thin, her silver hair messy against the pillow. But when she opened her eyes, there was recognition and warmth. "Emily," she whispered. Her voice was raspy but clear. She knew who I was. That was enough to make me breathe again. The doctor explained she'd suffered a moderate stroke. Her right side was weak, speech slurred but improving. She'd need months of therapy, maybe years. When I asked about my father, the nurse avoided eye contact. "He said he couldn't stand to see her like this," she murmured. He signed the discharge papers and left. I stood there, speechless. My father, Thomas Carter, former high school football star businessman, image of pride, had always been the man who wanted to look strong, not be strong. When life turned ugly, he vanished. That night I sat beside Grandma's bed holding her hand. Her skin felt cool but steady. The monitors hummed softly. She tried to speak again. "He left, didn't he?" I nodded, unable to lie. She gave a faint smile. "He's always been afraid of sickness. But you came back." "I'll stay," I said quietly. Her eyes welled with tears. "You've seen war, child. This is nothing." I almost laughed through my tears. "You haven't met Navy paperwork." She chuckled weakly, and for a moment we were just 2 women laughing at the absurdity of it all, one who had survived life and one who was still learning how. Over the next few weeks, I turned my life upside down. I filed for emergency family leave, moved into Grandma's old house, and started learning a new kind of discipline, one that didn't involve rank or command but patience. Every morning at 6 a.m., I'd help her with stretches, feed her oatmeal, and read the newspaper aloud. Some days she cried from frustration, other days from gratitude. And every night before bed I'd hear her whisper a quiet prayer, "Lord, give me strength to remember who I am." Sometimes I'd find myself praying too. The neighbors were kind. Mrs. Porter from across the street brought casseroles. Mr. Hawkins, Grandma's lawyer, dropped by to help with bills. Everyone in town knew my father was gone. No one said it, but the pity was everywhere in their eyes, their half-smiles, their pauses. One afternoon, Grandma asked, "Have you spoken to your father?" "No." She nodded slowly. "He'll come around when there's something to take." I didn't understand what she meant then, but the words stuck in my mind like a faint warning bell in fog. Months passed. Therapy helped. Her speech grew clearer, her steps surer. She even insisted on baking again, though the first pie came out burnt. We ate it anyway, laughing. In between Navy check-ins, I found a quiet peace in caring for her. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't heroic, but it was real. Sometimes she'd say, "You're more like your grandfather than your father ever was." I'd smile. "He was Navy too, wasn't he?" She nodded proudly. "Served in the Pacific, never ran from a storm." I thought about that often. By winter, she could walk short distances without her cane. We'd sit by the window together, watching the snow fall over the frozen fields. It was peaceful, almost sacred. But peace never lasts. Because on one ordinary Thursday, just after I'd helped her back into bed, she looked at me and said softly, "Emily, promise me something. No matter what happens, stay calm. Don't raise your voice. Let them talk." I frowned. Who? She just smiled faintly. "You'll know when the time comes." At the time, I didn't understand. But years later, standing in a courtroom with my father across the aisle, I would hear her voice again, and it would be the calm before the storm. If war taught me anything, it's that the hardest fights don't always involve weapons. Sometimes they're fought with patience in kitchens, hospitals, and quiet little Ohio houses that the world forgets. The first year of taking care of Grandma was the longest of my life. My military training didn't prepare me for the small heartbreaks watching her struggle to hold a spoon, hearing her cry when she forgot a word, or cleaning up after her when she was too proud to ask for help. I'd spent years commanding sailors, giving orders, keeping composure. But nothing humbled me like hearing her whisper, "I used to walk to church every Sunday. Now I can't walk to the porch." We developed a routine. At dawn, I'd help her through stretches and speech drills. At noon, I'd cook while she watched old reruns of Wheel of Fortune. By evening, we'd sit on the porch, me with tea, her with decaf coffee, and talk about everything from World War II to Navy rations. Some days were good, others weren't. She'd forget things like what year it was or whether her sister was still alive. The doctors said it was normal after a stroke, but every time she faltered, my heart clenched. I couldn't imagine losing her mind piece by piece. Still, there was progress. Slow, hard-earned, stubborn progress. I hung her old photo by the mantel, one from 1956 when she was 28, and radiant in her blue nurse's uniform. "See, I told her you were the Navy's first line of defense before I ever joined," she laughed softly. "And you're the last, dear." Every few weeks I'd report into my commanding officer, update them on her condition, and renew my family leave status. My superior, Commander Pierce, once told me, "Lieutenant Carter, you've survived open sea storms, but this might be the fight that earns you real stripes." He was right. The small-town gossip never ended, though. Some neighbors whispered that my father had done what any man would do, that no one should have to watch their parent decay. I wanted to scream that caring isn't weakness, that walking away isn't strength. But Grandma always told me people only speak from the part of themselves they know best. So I stayed quiet. Bills piled up, VA paperwork dragged on. My savings thinned out. There were nights I'd sit at the kitchen table with a calculator and a headache, wondering how long I could hold things together. Then I'd look at her sleeping in the next room, and the answer was always the same: as long as it takes. Around Christmas of the second year, she started walking again, 5 steps at first, then 10, then all the way from the living room to the porch. The first time she did it, she threw her cane on the couch and said, "You can tell the Navy they've met their match." I nearly cried. By the third year, I was able to pick up part-time work on base, again logistics support, via remote assignments. The military never forgot its own, and they found ways to keep me afloat. Still, the quiet of civilian life pressed heavy. I missed the ocean, the hum of engines, the simplicity of orders. But when Grandma laughed, that sound felt like home in a way the sea never did. Then came the letters. My father never called, but every few months an envelope arrived with no return address, short, curt notes. "Hope she's stable. Sell the property if she declines. Don't let her sign anything major." They weren't love letters. They were instructions, the kind of cold efficiency he used to run his company with. I never replied. One spring evening, Grandma asked me to drive her to the old family cemetery. We stood by my grandfather's grave as the sun dipped low. The air smelled of rain and lilacs. She whispered, "Your father has forgotten what love costs." I asked softly, "Do you think he'll ever come back?" She looked at me, then her eyes sharp, almost glowing. "He will. But not for the reason you hope." It sent a chill through me. That night she sat at her desk writing something for hours. I peeked in to check on her. Her hand trembled, but her focus was iron. "What are you writing, Grandma?" She smiled without looking up. "A record of what matters." I thought it was just another diary entry. I didn't realize it was the beginning of her will and of everything that would follow. In the 5th year, she seemed stronger than ever. She could dress herself, bake her own pies, even scold me again for tracking mud into the kitchen. I told her she was unstoppable. She winked. "Don't tell the doctors. They'll start charging extra." One night after dinner, she looked at me and said quietly, "Emily, when you're in uniform, people salute you because they respect your service. When you're out of uniform, people test you to see if you deserve it." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She smiled. "You'll find out soon enough." I didn't know then that she was already preparing for a different kind of battle, one that wouldn't need bullets or ships, but truth and patience. Looking back now, those were the best years I ever had. We didn't have money or security or much comfort, but we had purpose, and that was everything. It wasn't until the 6th spring, when the flowers bloomed early and the phone rang late one night, that everything changed. Emily, the voice was calm but cautious. Yes, this is Mr. Hawkins. Your father's back in town. The line went silent, and just like that, the past we'd buried rose again. When Mr. Hawkins told me my father was back in town, I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the phone, feeling that old ache stir, the same one that had haunted every birthday, every holiday, every unanswered letter. He'd been gone for years, no calls, no apologies, no explanations, and now suddenly he was coming back. I asked, did he say why Mr. Hawkins hesitated? He's been in contact with the county clerk's office. It appears he found out about your grandmother's estate. My grandmother's what? That was how I learned about the money, the part of her life she'd never mentioned. The next day, Grandma called me into her room. She was sitting by the window in her knitted shawl, sunlight painting soft patterns across her face. She looked peaceful, but her eyes, they were sharper than ever. You know about the inheritance now, she said matter-of-factly. I nodded slowly. I thought we were barely getting by. She chuckled. We were, but I wasn't poor. She explained that my late grandfather, a quiet man who'd worked 30 years at a manufacturing plant, had invested in a small piece of farmland on the outskirts of Columbus land that after decades had been sold for development. Combined with her pension and savings, it totaled nearly $1.7 million. I was speechless. Why didn't you ever tell me? She smiled faintly. Because it wasn't ready yet. Neither was I, and neither were you. Then she nodded toward her desk, where a thick envelope sat sealed with her neat handwriting. That's my will, Emily. It's been notarized and filed. Everything I own goes to you. I took a breath. Grandma, I don't... She cut me off gently. You do deserve it. You've earned every bit of it, not because of what you've done, but because of who you've become. I sat beside her, holding her hand. He's coming back, isn't he? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That week, I saw it myself. A black Mercedes parked across the street, same time every afternoon. He didn't come to the door right away, just watched. The first time our eyes met through the window, it was like staring at a ghost I used to know. 2 days later, he finally came in. No apology, no hesitation, just business. Mom, he said, standing in the doorway in his tailored coat, I heard you've been making financial arrangements. I thought we should talk. Beneath her shawl, Grandma's fingers tightened on her teacup. 5 years, Tommy. You didn't visit once. I was busy. I didn't even know you were in recovery until recently. I almost laughed out loud, but Grandma lifted her hand slightly, a quiet command for me to hold back. He continued, his voice smooth. Look, I don't want conflict. I just think someone should help you manage things. You're not exactly in the best shape to handle all that paperwork. She smiled, polite but cold. You mean the paperwork I already signed? He blinked. What paperwork? The will, she said simply. It's done. His face changed, confusion first, then disbelief, then anger. You let her handle that, he said, turning to me. You manipulated her. I took a breath, keeping my voice steady. She's capable of making her own decisions. Capable. He laughed bitterly. She can't even lift a frying pan. I stepped forward, but Grandma's hand rose again, steady, calm. Emily, she said softly, let him talk. He talked. Oh, he talked, for almost an hour, about how unfair life had been to him, how he'd been the one supporting the family for years, how he deserved his share. He spoke like a lawyer without a conscience, carefully twisting facts into pity. When he left, slamming the door behind him, I turned to her, furious. Why did you let him say all that? She smiled. Because I wanted to hear how deep the rot went. The following week, Mr. Hawkins visited. He'd already received notice Thomas Carter had filed an official challenge to the will claiming undue influence and mental incompetence. I was shaking when I told her. He's taking you to court, Grandma. He's saying you don't even know what you're signing. She poured herself a cup of tea, steady as ever. Good, she said quietly. Good, yes, she replied. Now he'll have to speak under oath. I didn't understand how she could be so calm. But when I looked at her, really looked at her, the straight back, the clear eyes, the small, confident smile, I realized something. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. That night I sat by her bed as she slept. The moonlight fell across her face, soft and steady. She wasn't fragile, she was deliberate. Every move she'd made was part of something larger, something I couldn't see yet. Maybe this wasn't just her fight. Maybe it was a lesson one she'd been preparing me for all along. He showed up on a Monday. Always a Monday, the kind of day that feels too ordinary for something so wrong. I was fixing Grandma's breakfast when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a black Mercedes parked neatly in the driveway, gleaming like arrogance in chrome. My father stepped out looking exactly as I remembered, tall, well-groomed, expensive coat, and a face that had forgotten what remorse looked like. Behind him stood a younger man in a gray suit, briefcase in hand, the kind of man who called his mother ma'am, only when he wanted something signed. "Emily," Dad said, as if we'd just spoken yesterday. "Dad," I replied flatly. "You're early, about 5 years early." He didn't flinch. "I came to check on my mother. I heard she's not herself these days." Grandma's voice drifted from behind me, faint but firm. "I'm perfectly myself, thank you." He froze when he saw her. I watched a dozen emotions cross his face, shock-guilt calculation before he settled on polite concern. "Mom," he said, stepping forward. "You look... well..." She smiled thinly. "You mean alive, Tommy?" The young man cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter, my name is Daniel Kleinman. I'm your son's attorney. We just want to make sure your affairs are in order. You've had a medical incident and under Ohio law." Grandma interrupted. "You mean the law that allows greedy children to speak for their mothers?" Kleinman blinked. Dad shot him a warning glance. "Mom, we're not here to fight. We just think you need guidance, someone to manage things." I crossed my arms. "You mean someone to manage her money?" He ignored me. "Emily, I'm not your enemy. I just want what's fair." Fair, Grandma's voice sharpened. Fair would have been visiting once in 5 years. Fair would have been paying one hospital bill. He sighed, exasperated. "Mom, you don't understand. You're not in a position..." Her eyes hardened. "To what? Think, speak, choose." The room fell silent. Even the clock seemed to pause. She set down her teacup and looked at me. "Emily, dear, let him talk." Her tone was soft but commanding, the same way she used to sound when teaching me piano as a child. I knew that voice. It meant she was in control. So I stood back and watched. For the next 20 minutes, my father and his lawyer presented what they called a proposal, transferring financial authority to him, temporarily updating the will for clarity, and establishing a trust fund he would oversee. He used the word protect a dozen times like it could hide his greed. When he finished, Grandma smiled serenely. "You've rehearsed that well. Almost convincing." Kleinman adjusted his tie. "Ma'am, with all due respect, we only want to prevent exploitation. At your age and health." "You assume my mind is gone," she interrupted, her voice icy. "And yet here you are trying to persuade it." He flushed crimson. Dad straightened. "We're doing this the legal way, Mom. If you refuse, I'll file for guardianship." "Then file," she said simply. I'd never seen him speechless before. For once, the man who had always controlled every room looked small in his own mother's living room. When they finally left, Dad muttered, "You'll regret this, Emily." "I don't think so," I said, closing the door behind him. The moment the car pulled away, I turned to Grandma. "Why didn't you let me say something?" "He's twisting everything." She reached for her cup again, hand steady. "Let him speak, Emily. The longer a liar talks, the clearer the truth becomes." She sipped her tea, eyes glinting like steel. "You remember how your grandfather used to fish shore? He said silence was the best bait." "Exactly." She smiled faintly. "We'll let him bite." That evening I helped her to bed. She seemed calm, too calm. As I turned off the lamp, she said almost to herself, "I've been writing everything down for years. Dates, payments, every call he didn't make. He won't see it coming." The next day, Mr. Hawkins came by with documents to prepare for what Grandma called a performance. When he left, he shook my hand and said quietly, "Your grandmother's sharper than any lawyer I've met." I believed him. Still, as I stood by her window that night, watching headlights fade down the road, I couldn't shake the feeling that something irreversible had just begun. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about dignity, hers, mine, and maybe somewhere deep down his, too. The official letter came on a rainy Thursday morning, certified mail, thick envelope addressed to Mrs. Margaret Carter. I signed for it, my stomach already in knots. Inside were the words that changed everything. Petition for guardianship and contestation of will. My father wasn't bluffing. He had gone through with it. I walked into Grandma's room, the papers trembling in my hands. She sat in her favorite armchair reading her Bible by the window. The morning light fell softly on her face, calm, unbothered, almost regal. "Grandma," I said, my voice shaking, "he's suing you. He's saying you're not competent." She looked up, raised an eyebrow. "Ah, finally." "Finally," I almost choked. "He's trying to take everything you have." She closed the Bible gently. "Let him try." I couldn't believe her composure. She'd survived a stroke, years of therapy, endless nights of pain, and now facing betrayal from her own son, she was calm as still water. Mr. Hawkins came that afternoon. He looked grim, but respectful. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "your son's filed for full control of your assets. His attorney's arguing that your cognitive decline makes the will invalid." Grandma smiled politely. "So they think I'm gone upstairs?" "Essentially, yes." She turned to me and said quietly, "Emily dear, would you fetch my blue notebook?" I found it on her desk, worn leather stuffed with folded receipts and handwritten notes. When I handed it to her, she opened to a page marked with a ribbon. Each line was dated. Each line was an entry. She began to read aloud. March 12, 2020, physical therapy, 2:00 p.m. Thomas promised to visit. He didn't. April 9th. Emily drove me to Dr. Allen. No call from Thomas. June 3rd. Thomas withdrew $10,000 from joint account, said it was for hospital fees. Never paid the hospital. Page after page, 5 years of quiet record-keeping. Dates, bank transactions, phone logs, even witness names. It wasn't paranoia, it was evidence. Mr. Hawkins adjusted his glasses. "You've been keeping this all along." "Since the day he left the hospital," she said. "You don't survive 78 years without learning to take notes." When the hearing date arrived, I felt like I was heading into battle, only this time there was no uniform, no chain of command, no clear enemy lines. Just family and betrayal dressed up in legal language. The courtroom was sterile beige walls, oak benches, that faint smell of paper and disinfectant. My father sat at the plaintiff's table, his lawyer Kleinman beside him. Kleinman gave me a smug half-smile as we entered, as if he'd already won. Grandma wore her best navy blue dress pearls around her neck, and a look that could slice through arrogance like a blade. When the judge entered, everyone stood, my pulse hammered in my throat. Kleinman began with a carefully practiced tone. "Your Honor, my client seeks only to ensure his mother's well-being." Following her stroke, she's shown signs of diminished judgment. Her current will, drafted under her granddaughter's supervision, raises significant concern. He presented charts, notes, even a neighbor's affidavit claiming Grandma seemed confused about dates. I clenched my fists. Every word felt like poison. Then it was Hawkins's turn. He didn't posture or raise his voice. He simply said, "Your Honor, the petitioner abandoned his mother for 5 years. My client, Mrs. Carter, maintained her household, managed her own accounts, and even recorded each transaction herself. The evidence will speak for her." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Kleinman called my father to the stand. I watched him raise his right hand and swear to tell the truth. The irony stung. He spoke confidently, weaving a story that sounded noble, how he'd sent money when he could, how he didn't want to interfere with medical professionals, how I had isolated his mother for my own benefit. I felt the heat rise in my face. Every sentence was a lie wrapped in pity. When he finished, Hawkins stood. "Mr. Carter, how much money did you withdraw from your mother's account on June 3rd, 2020? Dad blinked. "I don't recall." $10,000, Hawkins said. "Do you recall paying any hospital that amount?" "No, but do you recall calling her during her 5-year recovery? I was traveling. Do you recall visiting her at all?" Silence. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Answer the question." Dad swallowed. "No." Hawkins nodded calmly. "No further questions." When Grandma was asked to testify, everyone held their breath. Kleinman objected at first, claiming her cognitive abilities are in question. The judge allowed it anyway. She rose slowly, using her cane, and made her way to the stand. When she was sworn in, she looked every bit the woman I knew, small in stature but commanding in spirit. Kleinman asked gently, "Mrs. Carter, do you understand what this hearing is about?" She smiled. "Yes, my son wants what isn't his." Some people chuckled quietly. He pressed on, trying to trap her in confusion. But every time he asked a question about dates, she answered precisely. Every time he brought up a medical term, she cited it better than he did. Then came the moment that would echo forever in my mind. Kleinman asked, "Do you even remember signing the will in question?" Grandma looked at him evenly and said, "Of course. I remember the notary's name too, Ellen Briggs. Page 3 had a typo. You might want to check it." The courtroom went silent. I glanced at Hawkins, who hid a smile. Kleinman turned red, flipping through the papers like a man unraveling. When the judge called recess, Grandma turned to me and said, "See, dear, I told you. Just let him talk." She patted my hand. The louder they speak, the deeper they dig. And in that moment, for the first time, I truly believed her. By the second hearing, the courtroom had become a battlefield, just quieter. No shouting, no chaos, just carefully sharpened words cutting through the air. My father sat at his table, smug again, his lawyer tapping a pen like victory was only a formality. Everyone thought the case was already decided. Everyone except Grandma. That morning before we left the house, I'd found her sitting at the kitchen table dressed in her neat gray suit, her pearls shining softly in the light. She was reading over a stack of papers, lips moving silently. When she noticed me, she smiled. "You ready?" I asked. She nodded. "Always." "Are you?" In the courtroom, the tension was thick enough to taste. Judge Barrett, an older man with tired eyes and a calm voice, sat behind the bench, flipping through pages like he'd already seen too many of these family tragedies. Kleinman started with confidence. "Your Honor," he said, "it's clear from medical testimony that Mrs. Carter's condition renders her incapable of managing complex financial decisions. We're not challenging her love for her granddaughter, only her judgment." He moved through a slideshow of hospital records and doctor notes, carefully avoiding the ones that said stable or lucid. Then he turned to Grandma. "Mrs. Carter, could you tell the court what year it is?" She looked at him for a long moment, then said evenly, "It's the year my son came home to finish what he started. Only this time, it's not abandonment. It's greed." The courtroom rippled with a quiet gasp. Kleinman smiled awkwardly. "That's not quite the answer I was looking for." "No," she said, "but it's the truth." He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter, you claim to have written your will in full awareness. Yet we have medical documentation that you suffered cognitive lapses." She tilted her head. "Cognitive lapses?" "Yes, ma'am. Periods of confusion." "Ah." She turned toward the judge. "Is it confusion when someone remembers too much?" Even Judge Barrett hid a smile. Kleinman pressed on. "Can you prove that you were aware of your actions the day you signed the will?" She leaned back slightly. "I can do better than that." Then she reached for her purse. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled out a small USB drive and set it on the table in front of her. "This," she said, "contains a recording of my meeting with Mr. Hawkins on the day I signed the will. I asked him to record it just in case my son ever came back pretending to care." The courtroom fell silent. Kleinman looked at my father, pale-faced. Judge Barrett raised an eyebrow. "Is that true, Mr. Hawkins?" Hawkins stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I have a verified copy and chain of custody documentation. It was recorded voluntarily by Mrs. Carter." "Play it," the judge said. The sound of static filled the room for a moment. Then Grandma's voice came through the speakers, clear, steady, unmistakably hers. "This is Margaret Carter signing my will today, April 17th, 2023. I am of sound mind and body. I know exactly what I am doing. My son Thomas Carter has not visited me in 5 years, nor contributed to my care. My granddaughter, Lieutenant Emily Carter, has. That is why this is my wish. And yes, I expect he'll contest it. So if you're hearing this, Tommy, let me save you the trouble. I'm still sharper than you think." Gasps filled the courtroom. Kleinman's face drained of color. My father's jaw tightened, his knuckles white. Grandma smiled faintly, her eyes fixed on him. "You remember that day, don't you, Tommy? You said I was too weak to sign my own name, but somehow I signed it better than you ever could." Kleinman tried to recover. "Your Honor, this doesn't," but the judge raised his hand. "It's admissible." Then Grandma spoke again, this time directly to the judge. "May I add one thing?" "Go ahead, Mrs. Carter." She turned toward my father. "My son says he's worried about my well-being. If that were true, he'd have worried before I had money. The only illness here is greed." "You could have heard a pin drop." I looked at her, small, frail, but unshakable. Every inch of her radiated dignity. I'd seen admirals stand at attention with less composure. Judge Barrett looked at my father. "Mr. Carter, do you wish to respond?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. The only sound was the quiet hum of the courtroom lights and the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, Grandma turned to me and whispered, "See, dear, I told you, let him talk long enough, and the truth will have space to stand." That night, as I helped her back into bed, she seemed lighter, as if she'd set down a burden she'd been carrying for years. She looked at me and smiled. "I didn't win today, Emily. I just proved I never lost." The morning of the verdict felt heavier than any deployment I'd ever been on. The sky over Columbus hung low and gray, swollen with the promise of rain. Grandma insisted on coming to court in person, wearing the same gray suit and pearl necklace she'd worn to my Navy commissioning ceremony. If I'm going to hear judgment, she'd said that morning, I'll do it sitting up straight. Mr. Hawkins met us on the courthouse steps, clutching a folder under one arm. "He's nervous," he whispered to me. "Your father's lawyer tried to delay the ruling. The judge refused." Grandma smiled. "Then we're right on schedule." Inside the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. My father sat stiffly at his table, Kleinman beside him, looking less confident than before. There were more people this time, a few reporters, curious locals, maybe even some from the veterans community. The story had started to spread. Elderly woman defends her will against her own son with proof of mind and memory. When the bailiff called for silence, you could have heard a pin drop. Judge Barrett adjusted his glasses, his voice steady. "This court has reviewed the evidence presented, including testimony, financial records, and the verified recording provided by Mrs. Carter." My heart thudded in my chest. The petitioner, Mr. Thomas Carter, has failed to establish that his mother was mentally incapacitated or under undue influence at the time of the will's signing. In fact, the evidence shows clear, deliberate intent. I saw my father's shoulders tense. The court finds the will valid and binding, guardianship request denied, contestation dismissed with prejudice. The gavel struck wood, crack. It was over. A wave of emotion washed through the room, shock whispers, even a few quiet claps before the bailiff hushed them. Mr. Hawkins reached over and shook Grandma's hand. "Congratulations, Mrs. Carter. You've set a precedent today." But Grandma didn't smile at first. She just looked at my father the same way she used to look at me when I disappointed her as a kid. Not angry, just sad. He sat frozen, staring at the papers in front of him. For the first time, his face looked older than hers. Kleinman leaned in to whisper something, but my father didn't respond. Finally, Grandma spoke, her voice calm, deliberate. "Tommy." He looked up slowly. She gestured toward the bench. "Do you know why I kept the money secret all these years?" He shook his head. "Because I wanted to see which of you cared without needing a reason." The words hit him like a slow, quiet blow. "You always had everything," she continued. "The career, the reputation, the house on the hill. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that family isn't something to inherit. It's something to protect." Her voice softened. "I don't hate you, son. I just hoped you'd remember what it feels like to be proud of something that isn't measured in dollars." He dropped his gaze. I couldn't tell if he was crying or just exhausted, but for the first time, I saw the man behind the pride, smaller, broken human. When the judge dismissed us, reporters swarmed. I tried to steer Grandma away, but she stopped for one quick question. Mrs. Carter, a young journalist, asked, "What's your message to others who face something like this?" She smiled faintly, eyes twinkling. "Let them talk. The truth has its own voice." Outside, the drizzle had started again, soft and steady. Mr. Hawkins offered to drive us home, but Grandma insisted on walking the first block. "I've earned this step," she said. So we walked slow and quiet, Her hand looped through my arm, the courthouse fading behind us. At the corner, she paused to catch her breath. "You know," she said, "when I told you to stay calm, I wasn't trying to teach you patience." "No," I asked. She shook her head. "I was teaching you control, the kind they can't take from you no matter how loud they get." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "You did more than that, Grandma. You taught me honor." She smiled, a little tired but proud. "That's the Navy in you, dear." Back home, she settled into her chair by the window. The late afternoon light painted the room gold. The world outside went on as usual, kids riding bikes, neighbors mowing lawns. But for us, something had shifted. After dinner, I found her writing again. "What are you working on now?" I asked. "A letter," she said softly. "For your father. He won't read it now, but one day he might." I didn't ask what it said. I didn't need to. That night, before she went to sleep, she took my hand. "Emily," she whispered, "you remember what I said?" I smiled. "Let him talk." She squeezed my hand gently. "Good girl." As I turned off the lamp, I saw her eyes close peacefully. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, but inside the house, our house there, was only quiet victory. Peace feels strange after years of battle. It doesn't arrive with applause or fireworks, just silence. The kind that makes you wonder if you really won, or if the war simply ran out of energy. For weeks after the verdict, the house felt different. Lighter somehow. The framed photo of Grandpa in his Navy uniform beside his ship seemed to watch over us again. Even the ticking clock in the hallway felt softer. Grandma's garden started to bloom early that spring, as if the earth itself had been waiting for her peace. But peace didn't mean forgetting. The newspapers ran the story for nearly a week. Elderly Ohio woman outsmarts son in court with recorded evidence. Some of the articles got the details wrong. They said she was frail, nearly senile, miraculously lucid. I hated that word. Grandma wasn't a miracle. She was proof of preparation, discipline, and quiet strength. Neighbors dropped by with congratulations and casseroles. The pastor from her old church came to pray with her, but she waved him off gently. "Save your prayers for people who still need forgiveness," she said. "I've already done my part." As for my father, he disappeared. Kleinman sent a letter on his behalf. "My client wishes to extend his apologies and will not pursue further action." No phone call, no visit, just ink on paper, impersonal and overdue. Grandma read it once, then tore it in half. "That'll do," she said simply. Days passed quietly. I resumed my remote Navy duties, filing reports and running logistics updates from home. Grandma spent her afternoons by the window, writing letters, tending to her plants, humming to herself. One day I asked, "What are you writing, Grandma?" She smiled. "A new plan." Turned out she meant it literally. She wanted to donate part of her estate to the Veteran Stroke Rehabilitation Center in Columbus. "They helped me walk again," she said. "Now it's my turn to help someone else." We met with the hospital administrator a week later. Grandma insisted on attending the meeting in person, dressed sharply as always. When the paperwork was signed, the director, a man in his 50s with kind eyes, said, "Mrs. Carter, we'd like to name the new garden after you." Her smile was modest but proud. "Only if you promise it's not for decoration. I want benches, somewhere for people to rest and remember that healing takes time." A month later, they sent us a photograph, a small courtyard with 2 stone benches and a brass plaque that read, "The Margaret Carter Garden, where strength learns to breathe again." She cried quietly when she saw it. "You see, Emily," she said, "money isn't for keeping, it's for planting." That night, as we sat on the porch, the air warm with early summer, she looked at me and said, "Do you hate your father?" I hesitated. "I used to, and now I don't know. Maybe I just don't have room for it anymore." She smiled softly. "Good, hate takes space away from peace." 2 days later, a black car pulled into the driveway. I thought it was another reporter until I saw my father step out. He looked different this time, smaller, his hair grayer, his shoulders lower. He carried a bouquet of daisies awkwardly wrapped in paper. He stood at the edge of the porch. "Mom," he said quietly. Grandma looked up from her crossword, her expression unreadable. "You remember where I live," she said. He swallowed hard. "I read about the donation. It's beautiful." "Mm-hmm." She folded her paper neatly. "You didn't come for the article, Tommy." He exhaled shakily. No, I came to say I'm sorry. She studied him for a moment. The silence stretched heavy, but not hostile. Then she said, I know. He blinked. You know I know you're sorry. I also know you don't understand yet. But maybe you will. He nodded slowly. Can I come by again? She tilted her head. Next time, bring honesty. Leave the lawyer at home. He smiled weakly, nodded, and turned to leave. When he reached the car, she called after him, Tommy. He stopped. She said gently, You were right about one thing. What's that? You never could handle seeing me sick. He didn't answer, just got in the car and drove away. That night, as I helped her into bed, I asked, Why'd you let him off so easily? She looked at me with tired but bright eyes. Because, Emily, forgiveness isn't a gift you give the other person. It's the key that frees you. I sat with her until she fell asleep, her breathing soft and even. Outside, the crickets sang and the world felt wide again. Before going to bed, I stepped outside and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, ships moved silently through the dark, sailors standing watch just like I used to. And I thought, maybe this was my watch now, protecting not a base, but a legacy. In that moment, I realized something simple but powerful. Grandma hadn't just defended her fortune. She'd defended her clarity, her dignity, the quiet truth that outlasts any storm. And in doing so, she'd taught me that the greatest victories are the ones that end in peace, not pride. It's been 3 years since the trial. Grandma's garden at the rehabilitation center still blooms every spring. The benches always occupied veterans, widows, and families sitting under the shade of dogwood trees. Sometimes I visit after my morning runs still in my Navy PT gear and just watch the sunlight play across the plaque with her name. The Margaret Carter Garden, where strength learns to breathe again. She passed away peacefully last winter. No pain, no fear. She just slowed down like a sunset fading gently into night. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. She smiled right before she went as if she'd seen something or someone waiting on the other side. In her nightstand, I found a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside was a single handwritten note. Emily, remember, victory isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet room where the truth can finally rest. Let them talk, dear. Let them talk until their noise becomes your silence. Then build something from it. Grandma. I still read that letter on difficult days, especially now since I've been reassigned to Norfolk as a Navy training officer. Life's quieter but no less demanding. I mentor new recruits, many of them just kids, all pride and energy, no patience. When they complain about unfairness or betrayal, I tell them about her. I don't say her name, just a woman I once knew, and I tell them, she fought her war without weapons. She let the enemy speak until the truth spoke louder. It always gets them thinking. My father came to the funeral. He stood apart from everyone else at the back of the church, hands clasped, face lined with something that looked like regret. When the service ended, he waited until the others had left before approaching me. I know I don't deserve to ask, he said softly, but can I see where she's buried? We walked there together. No words, just the sound of our footsteps on frozen ground. The headstone was simple, her name, her years, and a single line she'd chosen herself. Truth outlives us. He stood there for a long time, then whispered, I thought I had everything figured out, Emily. But she was the one who always saw further. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. But when he started to leave, I said, she forgave you, you know. He stopped, eyes glistening. How do you know? Because she forgave everyone, even the silence. He nodded once, then walked away. I haven't seen him since, but I like to believe that somewhere he's trying to make peace with himself. And maybe that's enough. After she died, I kept her house exactly as it was, the teacups in their place, the Navy photo on the mantle, and that old blue notebook, the one with every date, every note, every quiet truth she ever recorded. It's not evidence anymore. It's legacy. On quiet evenings, I sit at her desk, the one by the window, and write my own entries, not about betrayal or courtrooms, but about gratitude, about service, about how sometimes the people who look the weakest are the ones holding the whole world steady. Last week, I got a letter from the rehabilitation center. They've expanded the garden and added a small memorial fountain in her honor. They asked if I'd say a few words at the dedication. When I stood before the small crowd, veterans, nurses, families, I saw my reflection in the fountain's surface. Behind me, the new plaque read, "For every quiet fighter who never stopped believing." I took a deep breath and said, "Some battles are fought in silence. Some victories are never celebrated. But if you're sitting here today wondering if patience still matters, it does. Because patience isn't weakness. It's wisdom waiting for its moment." The audience was still listening. I smiled. And if you ever face someone who doubts your strength, remember the words my grandmother once told me: just let them talk. Because one day the truth will speak louder than anything they said. There was a hush, that sacred kind of silence that happens when people truly feel something. I looked up at the sky, at the sunlight spilling through the trees, and for a moment I could almost hear her laugh again, soft, knowing, proud. Later that night, I walked along the harbor back in Norfolk, the ships moored quietly under the fading light. I watched their reflections ripple on the water, steady, disciplined, eternal, and I thought of her. She'd taught me that honor isn't about medals or titles. It's about integrity when no one's watching, about restraint when anger would be easier, about standing firm without raising your voice. And maybe that's what revenge really means: not destruction, but dignity, not punishment, but peace. So, if you've listened to this story all the way through, I want to leave you with something she'd say if she were still here. If you've ever been wronged, stay calm. Let the noise pass. Let the liars talk. Because when the dust settles, your truth will still be standing. Thank you for listening, and if this story reminded you of someone you love, share it with them. Maybe they need to hear that silence can be powerful too. 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 Powerful too.